actually. Okay.
Sorry, doctor, we can't really hear you.
Yeah,
So maybe.
someone's going to fix it.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. Well, I'll answer that question about water. Can you hear me okay?
Sorry, I tried something.
I've got a, yeah. Is it coming through, or I have an interesting echo this end?
Don't panic, it's okay.
If you'd like to, would you like me to answer the question, or is the audio not coming through yet?
Subtitles?
Yeah.
Zoom?
Can you hear me now? Is that okay?
It seems that you can turn on captions. Thank you. I didn't know that. Zoom is just a gift from COVID. Yeah, we have it.
Zoom is a wonderful tool.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you, Tech. Okay. Yeah.
We're live now. We're good.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, all right. Thank you for the question about water. Yeah, at the moment, 40% of the world's aquifers are depleted, and the predictions are dire. In the last 12 months, the rainfall patterns have changed dramatically. So the predictions for water may change, but water equals food, basically. And each year since, for the last 20 years, each year we've got more than 20 million people who are climate refugees. And this is mostly to do with water availability for crops. So there's good evidence. There's a paper written that links the drought in the Middle East, the Millennium Drought, to the mass migration from Africa up into Europe. And of course, we all know what strife that caused. Well, this is exactly what happens when we have water shortages. So yes, water is a big problem. Books have been written about how water wars could break out, and of course there are many rivers which are shared by different countries and regions that could be flashpoints for conflict. So yes, water is a great issue. China is having all sorts of problems right now. They're building massive infrastructure to take water from their water-rich south up to the north. But even still, they've got rivers running dry. And rivers running dry mean not just food shortages, but also power shortages. Power takes quite a lot of water. So yes, water equals food. And what we're doing is we're wasting water terribly by recycling water through animals that we eat. If we were to eat plants directly rather than animals that those plants are fed to, we would save ourselves a great deal of water. The Livestock's Long Shadow report put out by the United Nations said that we'd have a 50% surplus of food if we ate plants rather than the animals that eat the plants. So yes, it's a dramatic waste of food, of water. by eating animals. Does that answer your question?
Geeta? Does that answer it? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Gerard. Any other question? Anybody else? Yeah, there you go. Oh, okay. Oh,
Okay, hi. Thank you for this film. It's very informative. Okay, so my question is, right, okay, because we have all these plant-based meats, yeah, and a lot of like my family, for example, because they would be skeptical about eating all these because they think it's not so healthy, and eating like animal meat, they will still like consider it preferable lah. And so I would like to ask, like, is it healthier? Is there the evidence for the plant-based mock meats that are healthier? And also maybe what can we do to convince, you know, family and friends, people around us to eat more vegan? Because I think a lot of us over here are already vegans ourselves, but it's just quite difficult to convince people who are around us.
thank you.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, there's a wealth of information on that topic, but personally, I think that those foods, the mock meats, are really transition foods. I mean, the world's largest organization of nutritionists in North America have said that the vegan diet, the plant-based diet, is perfect for all stages of life, including pregnancy, breastfeeding, and kids growing up, as well as in old age. So we don't need to eat mock meats, basically. I eat very little of that. I've been vegan vegetarian for 30 years. The important thing is that those foods are just to, if you like, satisfy our taste. So we don't need to, as far as I'm concerned, we don't need to worry about the healthiness of them, but they are working towards much more healthy foods. And most of them they all come from plants anyway. Sure, they're processed, but we eat a lot of other processed foods. So that shouldn't deter us from eating the mock meats. The other thing is, I was looking at an interview the other day. There's a guy an Iranian strongman called Victor Babumain, something like that. Anyway, he just won. He's gone vegan about 10 years ago, and since then he's got 2 world records, strongman world records. And the last one was he carried more than 500 kilograms across stage, 20 meters or something like that. And he said, people ask me, how did I get as strong as an ox if I don't eat meat? And I answer them, have you ever seen an ox eat meat? So the fact is that eating animals is not necessary at all. Not for health, not for nutrition, not for strength. If you've seen the documentary, The Game Changers, it's actually beneficial for elite athletes. So, you know, there's a lot of old myths that are propagated, you know, feed the man meat. These kids that grow big and strong on meat. Well, it's just not true. They're myths. So, you know, quibbling over the health of the benefits of processed foods is beside the point. you don't even need the processed foods. You could get it all from plant foods, but processed foods are made from plants. So, and we eat a lot of processed foods as it is. Does that answer it?
Thank you. Thank you, Gerard. Okay, we have another question here.
Hello, good evening, Dr. Bishop. I'm Nadia. I'm a teacher in a primary school, local Singapore. So I was just wondering, in places like Switzerland, plant-based alternatives are much cheaper than meat options. How can that be replicated in places like Singapore? That's my question. Thank you.
So I'm not quite sure. You mentioned Switzerland and
Yeah.
Singapore. What are you trying to contrast there?
Plant-based foods, there are much cheaper options in places like Switzerland.
Yes.
Opposed to meat. So how can such things be replicated in Singapore? Yeah, I mean, I'm
Yes.
hoping to see something like that happening in Singapore in the near future.
Yes. Yeah, sure. Actually, there's been an explosion in vegan or plant-based foods globally, really. Let me tell you, 10 years ago, it was difficult to be vegan with food choices, but now in most places, it's so much easier. And I think Singapore, it's a very progressive place, so it'll soon be catching up, or if it's not there already. But yes, Europe is ahead of the world. UK is now ahead of the world. Germany, places like Germany, Switzerland, they're right up there. But it won't be long, and those sort of places and foods and choices will be available right across the board. So yeah, just a little bit of patience, and you might have to seek them out. But certainly Singapore, being the nation that it is, it won't be far behind.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else? There you go. Where's our runner? Oh, okay, sure. Go ahead.
Hi guys, I'm Belle, and my question is, as we transition our families to a vegan diet, some of the people are thinking, how about our pets, like cats and dogs? Can they possibly sustain on a vegan diet? And what do you think about the ethics of feeding vegan food to our pets? Thank you.
Yeah, good. Actually, there has been some research done on that recently, on dogs at least. I don't know about cats. Cats might be more difficult, but the paper I saw, which was only a couple of months ago old, said that dogs are actually a lot healthier on a vegan diet, a plant food diet, than feeding them meat. I didn't read the paper in any detail, but because I don't have a pet. But I know people who do have vegan dogs, and they've had them for years, and their dogs are thriving. Cats may be a little different, I'm not sure. But I know you can buy pet food, dog and cat pet food that is plant-based now.
Thank you. Before we move to our next question, I have one question, Gerard. I'll take advantage of the fact that I have a mic with me already. So when you talk about, when anybody talks about climate change or ecological degradation or environmental damage, and somebody wants to take steps to reduce their impact on the planet, usually they're up in arms for activities like tree planting, use public transport, use less plastic or no plastic, etc. But why is it that in the public domain, there is not enough information about the power of a plant-based diet in the context of climate change and the way it can actually solve the problem. So why is it that there is not enough information for people to read and take steps, which is so much easier than organizing an event for tree planting, look for the site and do so many things. Whereas eating a plant-based meal whenever, you know, it's possible for them can bring in such amazing results.
Yes, that is a really pertinent question. And I think it's due to many things, including cultural fixations with meat, the political distaste to do with changing anyone's diet, and also the industry. The meat industries are massive, and they are really good at greenwashing. I've just finished a paper on so-called regenerative grazing, which is, you know, they're using that as greenwashing extensively now, and it's nonsense. It's all just smoke and mirrors. But anyway, that's beside the point. The key point with what you're saying is that organisations and governments are actively avoiding the question. There is a wealth of science now that says that meat eating is the leading cause of biodiversity loss. It's causing extinctions, the greatest cause of extinctions. And we're in the midst of the 6th great extinction now. And it's also the greatest cause of global warming, if you include the opportunity cost of that land that's devoted to animals that could be growing forests for both soaking up carbon dioxide and providing new habitat. So there's a wealth of information there, of science there, but it's just not getting through. But it will get through. We are right in the midst of the pointy end of climate change, decades earlier than everyone expected. The models that the projections that they've done in previous years have said that, yes, dangerous climate change is going to be with us, but it won't be for a few decades. 2050s might be the time to get worried. Well, the time to get worried is now. This decade is the defining decade. If we don't fix it now, we are already in dangerous climate change, and it's being felt on all nations, rich and poor, north and south. It's hitting us hard. So we have these solutions. These solutions are profoundly effective. That is the meat eating or not meat eating solution. It's profoundly effective, but we'll only adopt it if we have to. My view is that we humans are slow but not stupid. So even if politicians won't even talk about it, it will get out. And movies such as this, I'll just give you an example. There's a Guardian newspaper columnist called George Monbiot. He's just written a book called Regenesis. And in that book, he says that if aliens were to visit Earth, to visit the UK, they would think that the predominant life form was sheep. And that says it all. Globally, of course, that's cattle, not sheep, but we devote so much of our precious planet to animals. In fact, all the grazing lands of the world, it's about 37% of all the land surface. All that grazing land gives us about 5% of our protein. Total waste for 37% of the land. If we rewilded that land, we would in one swoop solve the biodiversity crisis, solve the climate crisis. It's that powerful. But we won't do that until we take those animals off the land. sheep are incredibly effective at stopping any forests from regrowing, and fire is used in a lot of nations, including Australia, to stop, they call them woody weeds, but it's forest growing back. It's nature pushing back against man. So this fight is on between man and nature. And all we've got to do is stop actively suppressing the regrowth, and we will have solved our climate and biodiversity problems in one swoop. And the aliens visiting Earth might think, oh, this is a sensible race, these humans, rather than what it is now. Sorry, I got sidetracked. Does that answer your original question?
Yes, yes, totally. And you've added an angle of aliens. I'm wondering so many things. I'm wondering about so many things. Okay, so do we have any other questions? There.
Hi. So I wanted to find out, it's a bit of a two-pronged question. First, as what and kind of, I mean, I've read a lot about the challenges between science and government and globally, and you know, the shutdown of information, just the kind of red tape all around for you personally and the fellow scientists and colleagues that you've worked with. What has been a biggest challenge for you all in terms of government legislation, making the change and impact that you want to do? And what has compelled you to keep going?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I come from federal and state government in Australia. Most of my work, for 20 years, I mapped the deforestation in Queensland. And our group was the climate group and the pasture agronomist group. In other words, they did a lot of work on drought predictions and rainfall predictions for graziers, basically. And I saw firsthand the revolving door where government scientists left government to work for industry and then back again. The culture in government is, particularly in this area, is that the government agencies exist to support industry. They exist to help those industries prosper. They don't exist to fight climate change or to fight biodiversity loss or to benefit nature. It's purely for industry. So there's, even though these are top level scientists, these are very conscientious scientists, they get funding from the Meat and Livestock Australia, for example, in Australia, and it taints their point of view unconsciously, but it taints your point of view, and you're not going to bite the hand that feeds you. So don't expect any of that industry funded research to come out critical of industry. So that's one issue, but it's a global issue. So the scientists in this field are basically slanted towards industry. So it's very hard to find. So I left in protest, actually. My group, some of the scientists in my group had actually co-authored or been part of a paper greenwashing the Queensland beef industry. And I left in disgust at that. But I was on my own. Basically, they you know, you are rewarded based on the benefit you are to industry. So that's government and industry, and it's pervasive. It's very difficult. So when you read a report on grazing, for example, just keep that in mind. Actually, I might just mention a couple of things that I discovered when I was doing the research for the regenerative grazing paper. Now, there's three things that the industry-friendly research does that makes their soil carbon look good. The first is that they bring in inputs. Like there's a farm in America famous called White Oaks Farm, and they have these moving chicken coops, and that fertilizes the soil, and then they have cattle who graze on that grass. Okay, so the carbon for the soil, the additional soil carbon that they can show is increasing. That soil carbon comes not from grazing methods at all. It comes from the imported grain that they feed the chickens that then ends up in the chicken manure in the soil. So that's number one. You import grain or import nutrients, and that creates the additional soil carbon. The other trick that they use is that they reduce the stocking rate. So if you want to make a paddock look really lush and green and, oh, look at this wonderful grass, therefore there must be a lot more soil carbon, you just reduce the stocking rate. You take half the cattle or more off, and the grass grows lush. So that's the second trick they do. The third trick that they use is taking cropland and converting that to pasture land. Now, pasture land hasn't actually been degraded much, strange as it may seem, but croplands have been degraded of carbon greatly. So if you take any cropland and turn it back into grassland, the soil carbon will increase. So there's the three tricks that they use to show that the soil carbon increases with these regenerative grazing methods. But it's all smoke and mirrors. It's just nonsense. But it's widely quoted, and it's great for advertising. So that's why they use it. So sorry, I hope I didn't go too much off topic there.
Thank you, Gerard. Do we have our last question, Kelvin? No? I'll be the runner now.
First of all, thank you for a wonderful documentary. Yeah, I was glued to my seat. I like the way the story went, and it was very logical, especially for someone who's not very trained scientifically. But my question is, what really shocked me was the nets in the sea. And I always assumed that microplastics came from the mask that we use, straws, all the cups that we use for our coffee. If 80 or 90% of the microplastics actually came from discarded nets or ghost nets, as we call it, in your professional opinion, I mean, that's disastrous, because the ocean is the reason why we're all on this planet. What are we doing about it? I mean, there's very little information about these nets, and obviously the nets are discarded by the fishermen because it's much easier to just drop it into the ocean than to bring it back to shore. What is being done, and if it's all getting into all our sea creatures that we consume, that should raise quite a lot of alarm bells. But I'm not seeing that happening in this part of the world. Actually, we eat a lot of seafood. Singapore's per capita consumption of seafood is roughly around 34 kilos, which is as much as chicken, which is quite shocking. But that information is not flowing out. I'm wondering why that is.
Yeah, thank you for that question. The ocean is a very, very sad tale. We are trashing the ocean. The ocean's been our sewer, our dumping ground forever. Actually, it worries me a little to hear that the Singaporean consumption of seafood is high like that, because there's been research that's found that every ocean now in the world is so high in toxins that if you are to eat seafood every day, you will get mercury poisoning at the least, and other heavy metals and other persistent chemical poisoning as well. The seafood that we buy, the seafood consumption in most nations is like once a week or less. So that's below the threshold of toxicity. But high seafood consumption, I'd be getting really worried about that. And yes, the fact that the plastics, most of the plastics come from discarded fishing gear, is terrifying. I saw a graphic the other day that that showed the world's fishing fleet. Since 1970, I think it was, the world's fishing fleet has gone up by 5 times, and the amount of fish that's being caught has gone down to half of what it was. So we're getting more and more able to strip the ocean of fish, but the fish are just disappearing. And the problem is that the oceans provide 40% of the air the oxygen we breathe, and it looks like the plankton levels have gone down 40%. So this is a bit worrying. The health of the ocean, it's very close to collapse. There's 300 to 400 permanent dead zones in the ocean now, mostly from nitrogen and phosphorus pollution from factory farms. The Europeans have done a big study on that, and they've found that the best way to reduce what they consider the world's worst pollution, the nitrogen and phosphorus, is to at least halve the meat eating of Europe. So, that applies globally, of course. So yeah, the oceans are a very sad case. We are right at the precipice. I read a new term the other day. I can't remember the term exactly, but there's multiple crises happening right now. And this is just one of them. The oceans are just one of them. But, we cannot keep going like we have. The fishing industries are the same in Australia. It boggles my mind when we, and it's tightly controlled in Australia. So you get areas of fishing industry that they're off limits. They're for a certain part of the year, no fishing is allowed. But the uproar that causes, this is our income, this is our livelihood, this is jobs for our kids, this is putting our kids through school. Yeah, well, that's fine, but what if there's no, when the oceans collapse and we all die off, there won't be any jobs. So, we humans must come to our senses. We must stop trashing the planet. We must realize that the health of the ecosystems on this planet have our health as the bottom line. If those ecosystems are not healthy, we will not be healthy. We cannot survive without healthy ecosystems. So yes, the oceans are a very, very, very sad case.
Thank you. Thank you, Gerard. So we have come to the end of our session. And we have a couple of burgers, extra burgers. If anybody wants to take them home, then just do it. And you can give it to your family members who you have to continuously, yeah. Or somebody, okay, okay. Just one.
So if I can say, thank you so much, Ambery and Bianca and the Centre for a Responsible Future. Hosting a session like this is so valuable, and it's so important for our future that we get this message out, that your kids and their kids will thank you. But it seems like far out there to go plant-based, but it's in the future, it's going to be the norm, not the exception. So it won't be long before this will be generally accepted. But thank you for being pioneers.
Thank you, Gerard. We just have one last question from somebody. Is it okay? Can she ask her question?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Quickly.
My question is, I'm a bit skeptical of the overwhelming single theme message of the whole documentary. First of all, before Green Revolution started, most of indigenous society, their food consumption is from close proximity produce. That means it's in their own region of where they live physically. After maritime trade globalization started.
Sorry to interrupt. Could you just come to the question?
Yes, the thing is, in the whole documentary, a lot of the unethical production techniques were due to urban-led, export-oriented, demand-led growth. If we let all the zoologists and plant scientists take over food production, would it come to this day like this, that we face unsafe food that we consumers have no choice but to face in the supermarket?
Yeah. Look,
secondly, the other question, yeah. So
Sorry. We just have one question. We need to let him go, and we also have to vacate this.
Yeah. So from this, the whole documentary is about very unethical, commercialized bosses running the farms. So how do you think, in the old days, it was smallholders running farms. How do you think labor and food production can be organized so that consumers get safe food?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, look, that's a really good question. And if you look at the indigenous populations around the world, they did live sustainably. But we humans have a habit of taking as much as we can get. It's been a fight between man and nature forever. And even in the early days, even the original indigenous communities, as soon as they could, they started cutting down forests and growing crops. Civilizations grew around those areas where agriculture grew. And that's just our pattern of history. We've trashed forests forever. And it's just a logical extension of what we've always been doing. And it's not just, well, factory farming and big commercial operations for food production is just a logical consequence of our civilization. And the waste in that is incredibly, it is amazing. If we stopped eating animals right now, we would have a 50% surplus of food. We know that. So we can support many more people on planet Earth if we all went plant-based. And the fact is that we don't need to eat animals. We don't. So why are we killing 80 billion land animals per year and about 2 trillion fish each year when we don't need to? If you look at the wildlife now, at the mammals, from everything down to from whales to elephants to mice, mammals make up just 4% of the mammals on Earth. The wildlife makes up 4%, whereas 60% is the animals that we eat. So we've created this colossus, and the Green Revolution has enabled us to do that. You're quite correct. Pulling nitrogen fertilizer out of thin air, which is what that process is, has created the Green Revolution, which has allowed us to feed all these huge colossus. So we've been incredibly good at trashing the place. So now's the time. It's coming back to bite us. We can't keep doing that. We're polluting the air and the water with nitrogen and phosphorus, and the forests are beyond the tipping point. The Amazon rainforest is at the tipping point right now, where it mostly could revert to open savanna. The water cycles are out of whack. The whole Earth systems are just being trashed. So it's sort of nostalgic to go back and think, well, what if we all sort of ate locally and had farmers markets and you know, ate food that was locally produced? That would solve the problem. Well, no, that's part of it, but we can't keep eating animals because of the waste inherent in that system. It's just not possible to keep eating that way and survive. The figures are that if we stop fossil fuels tomorrow, emissions from business as usual food production will push us into dangerous global warming within a decade or two. So food, if even forgetting totally about emissions from fossil fuels, food emissions are going to be the nasty thing in the future. So we've got to change whether we like it or not.
Thank you, Gerard. And I believe that there are some people who still have questions. So is it okay if they email you their queries? Sure. Yeah. So can I share your email ID with them?
Yes, absolutely. I'm happy to email and to answer questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gerard. Thank you, everybody. Please give a big round of applause for Mr. Bisshop for being so generous with his time. And thank you, all of you. I don't know if the 9 burgers are still there because I saw some of them running out. One of the reasons could be the burgers. So thank you so much. If you have not signed up for Veganuary, then please do. It's on veganuary.sg. There are exciting events that are coming up, and we really hope to see all of you in all of those events. Thank you. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you, Amber.
Thank you, Gerard.
Good night. Thank you.